Ted Bundy described himself as the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. His crimes certainly prove that statement true. During the spring and summer of 1974, police in the Pacific Northwest were in a panic. Young women at colleges across Washington and Oregon were disappearing at an alarming rate, and law enforcement had few leads as to who was behind it. In just 6 months, 6 women had been abducted. Panic in the area reached a fever pitch when Janice and Ott and Denise Marie Naslund disappeared in broad daylight from a crowded beach at Lake Sammamish State Park. Ted Bundy was born in Vermont, across the country from the Pacific Northwest communities he would one day terrorize. His mother was Eleanor Louise Cowell and his father was unknown. His grandparents, ashamed of their daughter's out-of-wedlock pregnancy, raised him as their own child. For nearly all of his childhood, he believed his mother to be his sister. His grandfather would regularly beat both Ted and his mother, causing her to run away with her son to live with cousins in Tacoma, Washington, when Bundy was 5 years old. There, Eleanor met and married hospital cook Johnny Bundy, who formally adopted the young Ted Bundy and gave him his last name. Bundy disliked his stepfather and would later describe him to a girlfriend disparagingly, saying he wasn't very bright and didn't make much money. Little else is known for sure about the remainder of Bundy's childhood, as he gave conflicting accounts of his early years to different biographers. In general, he described an ordinary life punctuated by dark fantasies that affected him powerfully, though the degree to which he acted on them remains unclear. Ted Bundy graduated from high school in 1965, then enrolled in the nearby University of Puget Sound. He spent just 1 year there before transferring to the University of Washington to study Chinese. He dropped out briefly in 1968 but quickly re-enrolled as a psychology major. During his time out of school, he visited the East Coast, where he likely first learned that the woman he believed to be his sister was actually his mother. Then, back at UW, Bundy started dating Elizabeth Klopfer, a divorcee from Utah who worked as a secretary at the School of Medicine on campus. Later, Klopfer was among the first to report Bundy to police as a suspect in the Pacific Northwest murders. Also among the 4 people who gave police Bundy's name was former Seattle police officer in Rule, who met Bundy at around this same time while they were both working at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center. Ted Bundy's next victim in his first confirmed murder was Linda Ann Healy, another UW student. A month after his assault on Karen Sparks, Bundy broke into Healy's apartment in the early morning, knocked her unconscious, then clothed her body and carried her out to his car. She was never seen again, but part of her skull was discovered years later at one of the locations where Bundy dumped his bodies. Afterward, Bundy continued targeting female students in the area. He developed a technique, approaching women while wearing a cast or appearing otherwise disabled and asking them to help him put something in his car. The ultimate possession was, in fact, the taking of the life, Bundy once said. And then, the physical possession of the remains. Murder is not just a crime of lust or violence, he explained. It becomes possession. They are part of you. The victim becomes a part of you, and you, too, are forever one, and the grounds where you kill them or leave them become sacred to you, and you will always be drawn back to them. Over the next 5 months, Bundy abducted and murdered 5 female college students in the Pacific Northwest: Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carol Ball, and George Ann Hawkins. Responding to this rash of disappearances, police called for a major investigation and enlisted a number of different government agencies to help look for the missing girls. One of these agencies was the Washington State Department of Emergency Services, where Bundy worked. There, Bundy met Carolyn Boone, a twice-divorced mother of 2 whom he would date on and off for years as the murders continued. Unaware of law enforcement's growing interest in him, Bundy continued killing, journeying to Colorado from his home in Utah to murder more young women there. Finally, in August 1975, Bundy was pulled over while driving through a Salt Lake City suburb, and police discovered masks, handcuffs, and blunt objects in the car. While this was not enough to arrest him, a police officer, realizing that Bundy was also a suspect in the earlier killings, put him under surveillance. The officers then found his Beetle, which he had since sold, where they discovered hair matching 3 of his victims. With this evidence, they put him in a lineup, where he was identified by one of the women whom he had attempted to abduct. He was convicted of kidnapping and assault and sent to prison while police attempted to build a murder case against him. He was soon able to, for the first of 2 times in his life, escape from custody. In 1977, he escaped from the law library at the courthouse in Aspen, Colorado. Because he was serving as his own lawyer, he had been allowed into the library during a break in his preliminary hearing. Nominally, he was researching the laws pertaining to his case. But the fact that he was his own counsel also meant he was unshackled, and when he saw his chance, he took it. He jumped from the library's second-floor window and hit the ground running, disappearing into the trees before the guard returned to check on him. He planned to make his way toward Aspen Mountain, and he broke into a cabin and later a trailer for supplies. But resources were scarce, and it wasn't long before he scrapped his plan to vanish into the wilderness. Back in Aspen, he stole a car, thinking to put some distance between himself and the jail cell he was fleeing. But the reckless speed with which he left Aspen made him conspicuous, and police officers spotted him. He was recaptured after 6 days of being on the run. Bundy's next escape took place just 6 months later, this time from a jail cell. After carefully studying a map of the prison, Bundy realized that his cell was directly beneath the living quarters of the prison's chief jailer. The 2 rooms were separated only by a crawl space. Bundy traded with another inmate to get a small hacksaw, and while his cellmates were exercising or showering, he worked away at the ceiling, scraping away layer after layer of plaster. The crawl space he made was small, very small. He began deliberately cutting back on meals in an effort to lose weight. He also planned ahead. Unlike last time, when his escape had failed because he was without resources in the outside world, he stowed away a small pile of money smuggled to him by Carolyn Boone, the woman who would later marry him in prison. When he was ready, Bundy finished the hole and crawled up into the chief jailer's room. Finding it unoccupied, he swapped his prison jumpsuit for the man's civilian clothes and strolled out the jail's front doors. This time, he didn't dawdle. He stole a car immediately and got out of town, making his way to Florida. This time, he didn't dawdle. He stole a car immediately and got out of town, making his way to Florida. It had been Bundy's intention to keep a low profile, but Florida life was presenting unexpected challenges. Unable to produce identification, he couldn't get a job. He was back to grifting and stealing for money. And the compulsion toward violence was simply too strong. On January 15, 1978, 2 weeks after his escape, Bundy broke into a Chi Omega sorority house on the Florida State University campus. Within the span of just 15 minutes, he sexually assaulted and killed Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, bludgeoning them with firewood and strangling them with stockings. He then assaulted Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, who both suffered horrific injuries, including broken jaws and missing teeth. He then broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, who lived several blocks away, and beat her so badly she lost her hearing permanently. Still on the run on February 8, Bundy abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach from her middle school and murdered her, concealing her body on a pig farm. And then, once again, his reckless driving caught the attention of the police. When they realized that his plates belonged on a stolen car, they pulled him over and found the IDs of 3 dead women in his vehicle, linking him to the FSU crimes. Bundy was ultimately convicted and placed on death row at Florida's Rayford Prison, where he suffered abuse from other prisoners, including a gang rape by 4 men, some sources say, and conceived a child with Carolyn Boone, whom he'd married while he was on trial. Bundy was finally executed by electric chair on January 24, 1989. Hundreds of people gathered outside the courthouse to celebrate his death. Like and subscribe if you like this video.